It was a rough one getting on the air today, my folks. It was a rough one indeed. Today, talking to you about Catholic attitude. Put your attitude in check, baby. Catholic attitude, very important if you expect to be saints. You got to have a good attitude. You got to have a right attitude. Everybody can be Orthodox. That's easy. Everybody can know my Catholic faith. That's an easy one, oh boy. But having a good and correct and proper Catholic attitude is all the difference between actually getting to heaven and achieving a high level of glory or going to Mass every day and still going to hell. Hey, you heard it here first. Good Catholic attitude, very important. Hello to those of you catching me live and on demand, especially those of you catching me on YouTube, streaming live, and here at home base on Substack. God bless you and thank you. This is going out live and is recorded on December 7th in the year of our Lord, 2025. 2026 is hot on our tails. Are you ready for it? No, me neither. Let's fade that music out and get this rolling. I'm also going to talk to you about an interesting story, a very interesting story that actually ties into Catholic attitude. We're talking about an old school, old-fashioned excommunication and a splinter Catholic group. Now, when I read that story to you, I'm going to tell you about it, and I'm going to read it to you. And I want you to tell me, what kind of a splinter group do you think this is? We're going to get to that really at the top. But first, I have a few words for the Protestants in the audience. Now, you might not believe this, but I have no animosity toward Protestants. I really, really don't. But I'm the kind of person who I'm fine with tabling our differences, but I can't pretend they don't exist. And when they come up, maybe I'll mention them. Maybe I'll table them a little longer, bring it up later. There has been a lot of backlash over a video that I posted, actually a couple of videos that were addressing Catholics. They were actually not addressing Protestants. One of them was on the question of worship, because it's a very common misconception. In fact, it's a lie. It's propaganda that Catholics worship Mary, Catholics worship idols, Catholics worship statues. Protestants, I want to say this to you in a way that's very, very friendly. There is not a single, I don't want to say argument, but for lack of a better word, there's not a single argument that you have against the church that's valid. There really isn't one, okay? Not only that, but most of the things that you say against the practice of Catholicism are so unbelievably stupid, but everyone's afraid to tell you because we'd have to laugh at you first. And I'm saying that in the most friendly way. For instance, I understand it's an ace up your sleeve to tell Catholics that they're Mary worshipers, but we're really not. And you only make yourselves look dumb by saying that. Do you know why? Well, that was the point of the video that I made explaining what worship is, saying that we couldn't possibly worship Mary if we tried, because worship in the Catholic world is what worship was in the biblical world, and that involved an altar, a priest, and a sacrifice. So we couldn't possibly worship Mary even if we wanted to, because worship is the Mass, right? Well, Protestants were in an uproar over that. Do you know why Catholics and Protestants, I'm addressing you both, do you know why so many Protestants, and I'm being very sincere, I'm not doing this for ratings, who the hell am I? I've got like 300 subscribers on YouTube. Who the hell am I? Right? I'm not doing this for ratings. Do you know why they were in an uproar? I'm going to tell you why. And I want both, all Christians, Catholic and Protestants, and evangelicals, to listen to this. I'm going to tell you why they were in an uproar. Because not only did I expose that their Mary worship nonsense is ridiculous, I also exposed that their idol worship nonsense is ridiculous, but here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. I also introduced this question. Protestants, don't worry about whether or not I'm worshiping Mary. You should be worried about whether or not you're worshiping God. That's what they were reacting to in that video. And I'm sorry, Protestants, but that is just the deal. I want to offer this bit additional thought on that. You say you're worshiping God because you go to your church services every Sunday, yada, yada. That's great. And I am not saying that's valueless. I am not saying God doesn't care. I'm not saying anything like that. Your praise, your prayer, all of that is good. But it technically is not worship. I'll get into whether or not, if you want to know whether or not there's value to it anyway and why I say there is value to it anyway, you'll have to watch the other podcasts. I'm not going through that again. But I will tell you this. I'll give you this additional bit of argumentation. If you assert that what you do on Sundays, which, by the way, if you go to church, Protestants, if you go to church on Sundays to do your prayer and praise and worship, where is that in the Bible? Do you know why you go to church on Sundays? Because it's sacred tradition. It's another story. Let's talk about the Bible. When Moses went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go," do you remember why? Chime in the chat room, folks. I'm going to give you a minute to think about this. What did Moses tell Pharaoh was the reason for releasing the people? Because Moses did not go to tell Pharaoh, "Set my people free." Moses was told to go tell Pharaoh what exactly? Do you remember? I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to give you a minute because I want to chime in. I want you guys to chime in and tell me, what did Moses tell Pharaoh? Release God's people because, do you remember why? It wasn't to set them free. Aha, of course Ellis the critic got it. Anybody else think they have it? Because some people might not have seen what you said. Yeah, okay, let me get right to it. Ellis the critic got it right away. Moses didn't tell Pharaoh, "Set God's people free." He said, let me take my people so that we can go and worship, and then we'll come back. Moses was not told, of course this was God's plan, but this was not what Moses was told to bring to Pharaoh. He did not say, "Let my people go." He said, "Let my people worship. Let me bring my people out into the desert so that they can offer worship to God." Not freedom. Of course, that was God's ultimate plan. But Moses said worship. Well, how peculiar. Don't you think they could have just worshiped there in Egypt if all they were? First of all, the reason for not worshiping in Egypt is because worship involved killing animals as a sacrifice to God. And the Egyptians would have found that horrendous. Horrendous. If you thought the Egyptians hated them before, whew. So that's why they had to do it in the desert, outside of Egypt. First, it was outside of the pagan realm, I guess, but also away from the pagans themselves. Well, couldn't the Jews have worshipped right there in the privacy of their homes in Egypt? What do you think the Jews were doing in Egypt? Surely they were praying. Surely they were offering prayers of praise and even singing songs of praise to God in Egypt. But to worship, they had to leave Egypt. They had to leave Egypt to worship. Let's go again. Let's go also biblically to the exile of the Jews. There was a period in Jewish history where they could not worship. Well, what do you think they were doing in Babylon? They couldn't worship. Do you think they weren't praying during the Babylonian exile? Of course they were saying prayers during the Babylonian exile, but they could not worship. So clearly, my friends, what you guys do on Sundays, if you're a Protestant or evangelical, and I'm not saying it has no value, what I am saying is it's technically not worship. What you have just heard me give you are two biblical bits of evidence. That's Bible. So I want you to consider something. Maybe now you are the exiles in Babylon, because maybe now you are the ones who cannot worship. Why? Because it is you who have exiled yourselves. You separate yourselves from the church, and you remain separated from the church, choosing instead to latch on to anti-Catholic tropes and propaganda that are not true. So this is your time right now. This is a time for you to decide, do you really want to be in the crowd? Do you really want to be one of those who actually worships God, not just praises him, glorifies him, offers prayers to him? All of that is great. But do you want to worship him? Then the question is, does God care if we worship? Well, yes. Yes, God cares. Worship is something that God expects. That's normal. That's normal in our relationship with God, is worship. Prayer is good, praise is good, sure. But he expects worship. That's the height of it all. You can choose in your life to come home to Rome and to be part of the Catholic Church. I refuse to be a Mary worshiper. Don't do it to yourself, because we've already been there. We don't worship Mary. If you're not at peace with the Catholic practice of Marian devotion, that's okay. You can save that one for later, okay? But I strongly suggest that you bring your own exile to an end and come home and offer good and proper worship to God. And that's all I got to say about that. That's the first phase. Hello to Richard Hogan. Bro, that sounds like an 80s TV show, like Thursday nights at 7 o'clock, only on NBC. Richard Hogan, MD. Sounds like a show. That's beautiful. Richard Hogan, MD? Is that your real name? You should trademark that name. Thank you for joining me. Hello to Mountains of Elysium. Wow. Listen to this comment by Mountains of Elysium. God does care if we worship. He cared so much that he gave his only son. You could put a period there and that's already a banger. But he goes on to say, unlike with Isaac, he didn't hold back the sacrifice. Pretty good. Ellis says, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. Exodus 3:18. Thank you, Ellis. That's what I'm saying. He didn't say set my people free. Let my people go. He said, release my people so that we can go and worship. Well, if what they were doing in Egypt was already valid worship, why does he have to let the people go so that they can go to the desert to worship? I'm just saying. And if you happen to be a theologian who's going to get on my case about this, that's fine, because I like being corrected when I'm incorrect, when I'm wrong. That's fine. But I want you to know it's not going to be easy, because the Bible is very, very strong on this. It's not going to be easy to convince me, but I am convincible. If I'm wrong, tell me. Make the argument. Please don't hand me a plate of spaghetti, which, and I mentioned this in the other show, don't hand me a plate of spaghetti where, as we unravel this, here's what we find. Well, technically, worship really does require a priest and an altar and a sacrifice. You were right about that. But, you know, prayer and praise is tied to the efficacy of the Mass. It draws its power from the Mass. So technically what the Protestants are doing, this is me unraveling the spaghetti. Technically what the Protestants are doing may not biblically be worship, but it still has value as a sort of type of almost sort of worship. Okay, that's exactly what I'm saying. So don't come at me at this plate of spaghetti that when we unravel it, we find exactly what I said, but you are too afraid to actually say it because it requires you to say that the Protestants are not worshiping. You relied on me to say that. Okay. Oh, I got no problem with it. But if you're going to come at me and try to correct me, I'm good. I'm good with that. But Lord have mercy, you better have a correction. A correction, which means I am incorrect. And you have substance that tells me how I can deliver this more correctly. We're talking about Catholic attitude. And now, as I try to catch my breath, I'm going to bring up the first and maybe the only news story I'm going to talk about tonight. Now, let me see if this will work. Oh, God, it worked. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord, it worked. Lord, look, it worked. I can't believe it. Okay, it's been a rough one, folks. I'm telling you, it has been a real rough one. The folks who join me on Discord know, because they've been listening. They were listening to me bitch and moan about this for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes during the pre-show over on Discord. I'm going to be doing a pre-show and a post-show on my Discord channel. You got to be a member of my Discord channel to get in on that gravy. Now, leader of schismatic Colorado Springs group disregards excommunication. Now, listen to me. Listen very carefully to me right now. As I'm reading this, chime in wherever you're chatting from. I'll see it. Chime in, and I want you to tell me, are these folks that we're talking about, this splinter group, are they progressives or are they radical traditionalists? I want you to chime in. As I'm reading it, I want to see who figures it out first. Okay? Let's do it. This is by Catholic News Agency, written by Kate Quinones. After receiving a letter of excommunication from the Vatican, the leader of a schismatic group in Colorado Springs told congregants he would ignore it, furthering the divide between the small splinter group and the Catholic Church. Anthony Ward heads the Servants of the Holy Family, a group that labels itself as Catholic in spite of the Diocese of Colorado Springs' declaration that the group is schismatic. In a 40-minute speech to his congregation, in which he called church authorities, listen up now, in which he called church authorities a kangaroo court of heretics and Freemasons, Ward went public November 16th about his excommunication and his plans to continue ignoring Catholic Church directives. Now, so far, because the more we get here, the more we go down into the story, the more obvious this is going to be. But does anybody know yet, are these progressives, like abortion is okay and there are 78 genders, or are these radical traditionalists? What do you think so far? I'll share this with my Protestant friend. Joe Nolan says he is considering. Movie Guy got it right away. Movie Guy is chatting with me over there on Discord. That's so great to have you over there on Discord, man. I got to tell you, Movie Guy, thank you so much for that. Ellis, of course, Ellis the Genius. Ellis, you should change your name to Ellis the Genius. Ellis the Genius. That would be so funny. That would be so funny if you actually change your name and call yourself Ellis the Genius. That would be so funny. Ellis the Genius says, reminding me of some sedevacantists. You nailed it. These are either radical traditionalists or sedevacantists. They're kind of one and the same, just a hair of a difference. Let's go back to the story. During a secret ceremony in 2024, a bishop, whose name was withheld at the time, consecrated Ward as a bishop without papal permission. You see why it sounds like sedevacantism, but I don't think it is. I think it's just... I think it's just radical traditionalism. Like, it's no big deal. Oh, but it's just radical traditionalism. Come on, TJ, what's the big deal? In the Catholic Church, only the Pope can appoint bishops. Consecrating a bishop without papal, you know this already, folks. Let me skip down. Though excommunication is medicinal, yada, yada, yada. Excommunication is supposed to be medicinal. It's not supposed to be necessarily punitive. It's supposed to be corrective. Okay, that's what that's saying. Embracing the claims of the letter, Ward said he will continue to disobey, instead putting his loyalty toward what he called the true Catholic faith. Quote, I have not and will not obey commands from a kangaroo court composed of heretics, schismatics, and Freemasons, representatives of the vile, sinful perversions, enemies of the cross of Christ, Ward said. I don't know if he actually sounds like that, but I think it's funny to make him sound that ridiculous. Once I got there, folks, you were going to know we were talking about some radical traditionalists, right? You were just going to know that for sure once we got there. But here's the challenge. Don't they also sound like sedevacantists? If you know anything about sedevacantists, you're thinking, they do sound like sedevacantists, but certainly they're radical traditionalists because they started out, they were in the church before this excommunication. Yes. So they sound like Rad-trads, and yet they also sound like sedevacantists. Where am I going with this? The difference between Rad-trads and sedevacantists is the difference between a half a hair and a whole hair. If you split it in half. That didn't come out right, but you get what I'm saying. It's a hair's difference between radical traditionalism, today anyway, between radical traditionalism and sedevacantism. It's a hair's difference. Didn't used to be that way. It's that way now. What's the difference between ordinary run-of-the-mill traditionalists and radical traditionalists? Well, ordinary traditionalists are here. Radical traditionalists are here. But there's also an ordinary tradition. There's also a traditionalist camp in the middle, in between them, where they're not quite as radical as Rad-trads, but they're not far. You understand? They're a little further away from sedevacantism than radical traditionalists, but not very far. The point I'm trying to make with you is when you have a bad Catholic attitude, the movement from orthodoxy to heterodoxy is a sure one. The movement from heterodoxy to apostasy or heresy is a sure one. It could take years, could take months. I've seen it happen in the course of months with people. The difference is Catholic attitude. Now, let's get on with it. Let's talk about Catholic attitude and what that means. I'm going to do this to the very best of my ability, considering the fact that I didn't have as much time to prepare as I usually like to have because so much tech was going wrong. But I'm going to do my very, very best. Attitude. Sorry. Now, Oh, God, we can't hear that guy twice. It's already rough trying to hear him once. Can't listen to him twice. I'm just going around the room here. Let me see if anybody's saying anything that should be shouted out, called out, congratulated, something. Anybody to say hello to? Hello, Mounds of Asilium. That's such a cool name. I'm trying to remember what movie that was from, Asilium. Many Protestants look down on Catholics. In doing so, they turn their backs to God. I'll tell you, man, many Protestants look down on Catholics, and in doing so, are they turning their backs on God? I think some of them are. Some of them are not. In either case, most of them are not doing it on purpose. I will say this, though, that I'm learning lately about Protestants, and I think this is a shift in Protestantism. I think this is a shift, something that's happening now, or that is happening now that we haven't seen before, is even Protestants have Protestants. Protestants have radical traditionalists. Protestants have their lefty-loosies, if you want to call them that. And they have that problem worse than even we do. Because there are some very solid Protestants who really are not anti-Catholic. I'm encountering more and more, this is true for about the last 10 years, I think, that I can say I've regularly encountered Protestants who do not deny that Catholics are Christians. They have their disagreements with us, right? They have fewer disagreements than Protestants used to have. They have some core disagreements, of course, but they do not deny that we are Christian. Whereas Protestants of the past, that was always a question for them, right? Protestants are more and more warming to the fact that Mary deserves more than a pat on the back. We're seeing that shift. So we're seeing solid Protestants looking toward holiness and stuff like that. We are also now that this group of like solid Protestants is set apart from the rest of the batch, what we're seeing in the batch now has less room to hide. They have less people to hide behind. So what we're seeing now is Protestants who actually aren't Christian. They're cultists. They're from the cult of the Bible. You might say someone, I think on Discord, I don't remember, someone made a comment. It might have been a comment on YouTube. I don't remember. But he quoted Flannery O'Connor, who said, so many Protestants are, I think he said, Christ-haunted. They're Christ-haunted. They're not really Christians. They're Christ-haunted. I see that where there's a cultism in the non-Catholic Protestant community. And there's a lot of them. I'm finding that. There's a lot of them. I'm not saying it's all Protestants, but I'm saying it exists. There's a lot of them. And I'm finding Protestants who may not be so solid, but they do believe in Christ. They love Jesus. They read the Bible. They want to model themselves after what they see in the Bible, what they see in the life of Jesus. And now those are all good things. But they don't know the Bible near as well as what I used to think they knew. Not anywhere near as well. Not anywhere near as well. Their biblical arguments are particularly very, very bad. Some of them will flat out reject biblical arguments. It can be explicit in the Gospels, and they will reject it, which I cannot believe. So something strange is afoot over there in Protestant town. Whatever, it's not up to me to minister to them. What I'm trying to do is protect and preserve my brothers and sisters in the Catholic Church and to help God and the church to make saints out of them. All right, let's get back into it. Catholic attitude, Actually, let me just use this PDF that I put up for people on Discord. By the way, folks, I strongly encourage you to join my Discord because that's where community can really happen. There's some activity and stuff going on there, not just that you get to chit-chat with other good Catholics, but you get to learn your faith a little bit, share prayer requests, ask questions. They don't have to be religious questions. If you need life advice and stuff, we've got a questions panel there. I have an apologetics training channel there. I drop It's really interesting. It's really fun, but it's not going to be as interesting or as fun without you there. Discord.gg/firebrand. You'll also see this link everywhere on socials, especially here on YouTube. It's one of the links that I've put up in my profile. Discord.gg/firebrand. And I also encourage you to sign up for my newsletter, CatholicFirebrand.com. And that's about all the energy I have to plug that. CatholicFirebrand.com. Come on with it. All right. So let's take it from the script. Usually I don't do this, but today I'm going to have to because I'm so off track. Today I want to talk to you about something we don't usually hear in homilies or in catechism class. We talk about faith, morality, doctrine, sacraments, but not this. Attitude. Your Catholic attitude. What is a Catholic attitude and why is that important? First, attitude is important because it determines where you're going, right? It guides your trajectory, which means it determines your destiny, your destination, okay? If you have a bad Catholic attitude, you may not get to your destination, holiness, sainthood, or you might get there and not achieve a very high level of glory. If you want to be a powerful tool or weapon in the hands of Jesus Christ, you can't be a slob. You cannot be a Catholic slob. You have to get tough. You have to have a good Catholic attitude, and that's just the bottom line. Folks, you might think, well, thank God I'm not a slob. How do you know you're not a slob? Do you know how many Catholic slobs I encounter out here? I'm being very serious. This all has to do with Catholic attitude. Catholic attitude determines what kind of Catholic you will be. What kind of Catholic you are determines where you wind up at the end of your journey. I'm not saying you're going to wind up in hell with a bad attitude. I have no idea. What I do know is having a good and strong Catholic attitude actually is not optional. It's really not optional. When I talk about Catholic attitude, I'm talking about a disposition, an interior disposition of soul, a psychological or a mental, an intellectual disposition. I'm talking about a receptiveness to truth and reality. That takes humility. So that's the first characteristic of a good Catholic attitude that I'll throw at you, is humility. Folks, someone just recently said, I don't need your biblical evidence. I know my faith very, very well. Someone recently just said that very thing to me, a Catholic. I don't need biblical evidence. I know my faith. Well, you're literally saying something contrary to what's in the Bible. Don't need the biblical evidence. I know my faith. First characteristic of a good Catholic attitude is humility, recognizing or acknowledging your own smallness, acknowledging that some people have something to offer that you do not possess. I don't need your biblical evidence. I know my faith very well. Okay. That's someone who has a very bad Catholic attitude. How are you going to better yourself if you have a bad Catholic attitude in that you don't have the humility that leaves you open for correction? Humility, very important to have a good Catholic attitude by being humble. Humility is hard, folks. It's one of the most difficult. And I'm telling you this as somebody who's very prideful, okay? And not nearly as bad as I used to be. But I'm telling you from experience, as someone who is prideful, humility is one of the hardest virtues to build. But it's probably the most important one. That's why it's at the top of my list. Humility is very hard to build, but it's the most important one. And I will share this story again. This was very striking to me when I read this about the life of St. Anthony the Great. There was a day when St. Anthony the Great, or St. Anthony of the Desert, was given a vision of all of the temptations, or he was given knowledge, I don't remember exactly, a vision or knowledge of all the temptations that humanity would face until the end of time or something. I don't remember exactly the parameter, but he knew about temptations we face today. That I can say confidently. So the Lord let him know or see all these temptations, and he said to God, and I remember in the story, he was really distraught when he saw this or learned this or encountered this. And he said, how can anyone possibly avoid all of these snares? And the Lord answered with one word, humility. It stuck with me. It really stuck with me, humility. Obedience to God. Well, we think that's an obvious one, right? Of course you have to be obedient to God. A lot of people are not obedient to God because a lot of people think what they want to think about what's right and wrong, and they want to think what they want to think about what's the glory and honor due to God. I don't need to go to church. I can worship at home. Okay. Whatever. And so on and so on. And we have to ask ourselves in humility, people like you and me have to ask ourselves too, are we inclined to total obedience to God? I can say for myself, I only recently got there where I can say I am inclined to total obedience to God. I won't always do it perfectly, but for most of my life, where was my heart with regards to that? Lord, tell me what you want and I'll consider it. Tell me what you want, I'll consider it. I'll strongly consider it, but I'm just going to consider it because I don't know if I can trust you sometimes. I can trust you, but sometimes you ask things that are just wonky or too hard, or I'm just not digging it, Lord. I'm not digging it. Tell me what you want and I'll consider it. That used to be my mentality. I only recently arrived at a place where I can say, whatever you want, Lord, I will do it. I may do it poorly. I may not do it well. I may need a lot of practice. I don't know. But whatever you want, Lord, I'm going to commit myself to it. What you want, Lord, I will do. So even those of us who are on the road to holiness, we go to Mass, we try to be prayerful, whatever. We're trying our very best. Even we have to ask ourselves, do we have an attitude of humble obedience to God? Here's one that people are going to struggle with. Do you have an attitude of humble obedience to his church? I'm going to pause and let that sink in. Do you have an attitude of humble obedience to, folks, you better really listen carefully. The Holy Catholic Church is the mystical body of Christ, and you have to obey the church. You do not have to like what the church teaches you, but you have to obey the church because what the church teaches is what Christ teaches, and you don't have to like it. I'll never forget that story in the scriptures. Lord, tell me what I have to do to achieve eternal life or something. Well, you have to obey the commandments and do the will of God, whatever it was that Jesus said. Very technical theology I'm offering you here. And he said, all of these things I have done, Lord. And then Jesus says, well, now you have to sell everything that you have and give to the poor. And the guy walks away sad. There are different ways of interpreting what Jesus means by what he says, from literal to metaphoric. It's irrelevant. The relevant part for us here is the guy walks away sad. I don't know that I want to do that, right? I don't know if I can deal with that. The guy walks away sad. I hate to say it, but sometimes the church is going to make us walk away sad. The answer is no to co-redemptrix. That might make you sad. The answer is no to the traditional Latin Mass. That might make you sad. The answer is no to female priests and deaconesses. That might make you sad. What about those of you who don't care for the TLM? You don't care if there's a TLM or not, and you never wanted, female priests in the first place. Well, sometimes the church is going to teach you something, or sometimes the church will guide you to something that makes you sad. Sometimes the church will guide you to something that will make you sad. It could be a teaching. It could be a ruling. It could be an attitude adjustment. It could be your conduct. It could be your voice. You don't think, let me tell you, I wish the church had my voice. I wish the church spoke with my voice. Something a little more John the Baptist, right? Something a little bit more Moses in the Ten Commandments movie with Charlton Heston. I wish the church spoke with my voice, but the church does not speak with my voice. The church speaks with her voice. And if I am going to accept the honor of evangelizing, doing the work of the gospel, etc., then I have to accept the responsibility to speak with the church's voice. Sometimes the church will come out with a ruling or a statement or whatever, and I'm like, you got to get tougher than that. And by church, I'm talking at like the Vatican level. You got to get tougher than that. But that's my problem. That is the church's voice for whatever reason. Maybe the church at a parish level can get tougher. Diocesan level can get tougher. Sure, maybe. But my point is, all of us are going to be challenged by God, by Jesus Christ in the gospel, or by the Holy Catholic Church, by her voice, her guidance, her decrees, her judgments, her teaching. That's normal. But to have a good Catholic attitude, you have to have a humble attitude of submission and obedience. Does that mean you have to have blind faith? I'm going to do this very quickly. There's a difference between two types of obedience. Filial obedience is where we want to get to, where we obey totally and completely for love of the church, out of trust in the church, which is an extension of our love and trust of God. It's an extension of God is not out of the equation. It's an extension of our love and trust in God. Wow. A lot of things going on Discord, man. I don't know what's going on. I just keep seeing a lot of messages coming up there. Probably somebody's trashing me there right now. That's the kind of trust that we have to have. Total, right? Total obedience out of total trust and affection. You don't have to obey like a slave, right? Out of fear or out of sheer stupidity. I'm too stupid to know any better. You don't have to obey like a slave, but you do have to totally obey like a child. Not like a slave, but like a child. That's not blind obedience. That's humble submission. And there's a difference. You understand? That is good Catholic attitude. I was just having an exchange with someone on Substack today. It was a fairly brief exchange. And the guy was very blunt, which I can dig. It was a good conversation. He was blunt. He was clear, true to himself, not backing down from his thoughts and ideas. And I dig all that. But he was nice. He was respectful. It was just a really nice exchange. And I was telling him what I'll share here with you. 30 years as an evangelizer, I have never known the church to be so resistant to learning. By the church, I'm talking about the people. I have never known Catholics to be so resistant to learning and correction, ever, until just lately. I don't know, past decade maybe. I mean, like super resistant to learning. Super resistant to learning. Well, I think that blah, 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 blah. Well, this is what the church teaches. Nope, don't care. Or, well, this is what the church teaches. Nope, that's not what Thomas Aquinas said. Thomas Aquinas never said that. But this is what the church teaches. Thomas Aquinas is not the church. Nope, Thomas Aquinas was a doctor of the church and yada, yada, yada. I don't know, they go on there, Thomas Aquinas platitudes, whatever. You can tell them a million times. You're talking about the same Thomas Aquinas who, for a very long time, did not believe in the Immaculate Conception. That Thomas Aquinas? Hey, folks, if you're a fan of Thomas Aquinas, God bless you. So am I. But no saint is the magisterium of the church. You know what? Thomas Aquinas would tell you that too. Moving on. People are very resistant to learning. They're very resistant to correction. Very resistant to correction. And I blame the scandalizers in Catholic media for that. Independent Catholic media, who have people so terrified of the Holy Catholic Church that they have. People today feel like they have to protect Catholicism from the Catholic Church, or they have to protect the Blessed Mother from the mystical body of her divine Son. Makes sense, right? That's the church that we're living in. You have to have an attitude of humble submission and obedience. Highlight the word humble there. To have a good Catholic attitude, because your path from here to sainthood is a path of challenge and correction. And if you don't like to be challenged and corrected, my friend, you will either not make it to heaven, or you will not make it to heaven at a high level of glory that God intended for you to have. Good Catholic attitude. Let me take a moment and give my voice a break. Go around the room, see if anybody's saying anything worth calling out. Oh, Jam Rat says, thank you for being faithful to the Magisterium. I wasn't always so. This is what brought me to your channel. Oh, I'm so glad, Jam Rat. Let me tell you something. Talking about faithfulness to the Magisterium. Things sometimes have been rocky rocky for me with the Magisterium. And I piled through anyway. I was nervous about the synod thing. I still think the synod thing is stupid, but I don't think it's like anti-Catholic. I wouldn't say I was nervous. I was feeling the same vibrations in the air that everybody else was feeling. But what I did with it is different from what they did with it. Because they said they're going to ordain women. They're going to destroy the church. They're going to change doctrine. And I absolutely refuse to go there because those things are crazy. And I know the church doesn't go crazy. Well, maybe people in the church do, but I knew there was going to be no change of doctrine and so on and so on. The point I'm trying to make is I felt those vibes, but I just was not going there. I just was not going there. You have to be faithful to the Magisterium, absolutely. Sometimes what you'll get from the Magisterium or from the Pope is going to be challenging, confusing, frustrating. Too bad, that's your problem. That's what I have to say about that. I'm not even going to intellectualize it. Too bad, that's your problem. Deal with it. Because the church speaks with Christ's authority. And I have always known and trusted the church to be a very, very good mother, caring not just for my soul, but the souls of the children of God, the sons of God, the daughters of God. Their souls are in such good care with the Holy Catholic Church. Like, and I believe that, man, deeply, very, very deeply. Like, I see the church as a mother caring for this. Every confession is a silent rescue mission. Every consecration of the Eucharist and handing out the Eucharist to people, you're giving them the power of heaven, you know, for them to consume. I've always known this, that the church, that souls are in very good care with the church, not just in theory, but actually, you know, actually. Every blessing, every anointing, oh man, I remember one time I was taking my class, this was years ago. I was taking my class to confession. It was like, you know, you have to go to confession before Christmas or something. It was one of those confessions. And because it was the whole program, it was a bunch of kids. So they did the confessions in the church, like in the open, but, you know, spread out and stuff. But you couldn't, I think there were 2 confessionals there. You can't do the whole program with 2 confessionals. Anyway, so I'm far enough away. But every time I saw the priest raise his hand over this child, doing the prayer of absolute, oh my God, man, I get goosebumps now remembering it. Raising his hand over this child, giving the prayer of absolution. And by then I was like an expert at going to confession, you know, like I knew the prayer of absolution by heart, you know, so it's almost like I'm hearing it like in my memory as I'm watching this. But, and I didn't have like a vision or anything. I didn't literally see this, but it was as if I was seeing these chains fall from this child. Because you could see in this intensity in this child's face, he was like in the 7th or 8th grade, the intensity in his face, that he was really giving a confession, you know? I don't know, man. I can't put words to it, but watching, it wasn't just this one priest with this one child. Every time I saw a priest raising his hand over a child, do the sign of the cross and the absolution, I was like, Lord have mercy, this is beautiful. This is so cool. I wish I had words to express like what I felt inside as I was watching this, but this is how I see the church. And if the church tells me something that doesn't make sense, well, who am I talking about? I'm talking about the church that I know cares for the sons and daughters of God. Our souls are in good care with that with the church, the magisterium of the church. I'm confused by this teaching, but okay. If you say this is true, then it is true. And that's it. Well, you know, the clouds are made of cotton candy. Okay. If you say it's true, and that's it. I've spent long enough verifying your claims, Holy Mother Church. And what I've taken away from like my teenage years is no matter what the church tells you is true, it's the truth. It's definitely the truth. The church is so careful and so thorough. You tell me something is true that's different from what I think is true, and I tell you, Holy Mother Church, I will say that I'm wrong. I got it wrong. I got it wrong and you have it right. Doesn't matter how sure I am, I must have gotten it wrong and you got it right. And then it's up to me to figure out where I got it wrong. True. That's the attitude that you have to have. Because why does the church exist if not to prepare us for heaven? Part of that preparation is a conversion of the mind, right? A conversion of the mind, not just a conversion of the will, but a conversion of the mind. And if we block the church from being able to do that, where do you think you wind up? Where do you think you wind up? And my thing is, I don't just want to get to heaven. I want to experience holiness now with this body in this life. What did God intend for me to experience when he thought me up and you? What did God intend for that experience to be like before sin entered the mix? I want to get as close as possible to that experience now in this life. Total convert as much as possible in this life. Do you think that I believe I can get there by grading the magisterium of the church? You going to grade the magisterium of the church, my friend? Who the hell are you? You answer me that one, and it better be real good. It better be real smoking hot good. Who the hell are you? You'd better be so educated and so experienced and so eloquent. And let me tell you, tough guy, better be a whole lot of humility in what you say. It better be, and it better not be a lick bit of pretense in it. Who the hell are you? Because if you are going against the magisterium of the church, you had better be damn impressive. And to those of you who are the opposers, I'm going to tell you now, none of you impress me. You truly don't. So please, if you're going to try to match wits with the magisterium, you better practice. Practice real hard, chum. Real hard. Mountains of Elysium says, the magisterium can be wrong, but God will always correct it to the greater glory of the church. That's a good point. The Arian heresy, after the church overcame, she was stronger. See, but the Arian heresy was not the magisterium of the church. The magisterium long declared Arianism, or what was believed by the Arians, to be an error. Some members of the church, some bishops, I guess high-level bishops, I don't remember, I guess some members of the magisterium, individuals, were Arians, yes. But the magisterium of the church had already said that is an error, that is heresy. Interestingly, after the church declared that to be a heresy, there were still Catholics who held on to it and said, nope, it's true. Sound familiar? And I'll leave it at that. Okay. Let's continue to have a good Catholic attitude. Be open to correction. Be united rather than divisive. Folks, the church mirrors the eternal. The church is not eternal. So how can the church mirror the eternal? Well, let me give you one example. The consecration of the Eucharist. That's happening eternally in heaven. Well, we can't do it eternally. So the way we mirror the eternal is to repeat it. Do this as a remembrance. We repeat it at every Mass. We repeat it. Okay? Eternity, think of it this way. Eternity happened and is happening and will be happening all at the same time. So the way we reflect that Eucharistically is to repeat it. Doing this as a remembrance, right? Repeat it. One of the things that we have to reflect in the eternal order is our unity, our oneness, our wholeness. Obviously, we're not going to be, if there's 10 billion Catholics, it's not going to be 10 billion copies of each other. But being unified, first, it's a requirement of the church to be one, but also it's a requirement for us as people who come from the eternal and are destined to go to the eternal, because we ourselves are not eternal. We have to maintain that spirit of oneness and unity. When we are saying, well, I have a spirit of oneness, but you're the one who's wrong. When we're saying that to someone who's another Orthodox Catholic, you're not, oh God, folks, you know, people get on my ass because though I kneel for communion and receive on my tongue, which you would think would please the traditionalists, and I've been doing that for like 25 years, you would think that would please the traditionalists. Nope. Wouldn't you know, and this has happened to me at least a dozen times, that there's always a traditionalist who has to get on my case because I only kneel on one knee. I kneel on one knee because I have a little bit rickety knees, just a little bit. I don't want to risk it being difficult to get down than difficult to get up from two knees. I want to kneel, receive, and get out of the way. I don't want to make a spectacle of myself. So I receive on one knee because it's easier to do it that way. It's easier to go down, go up. Doesn't matter if my knees are not great that morning. Wouldn't you know? There are people who get on because you ought to get down on both knees. You're doing it wrong. We have to have a spirit of oneness and unity. And when we're always criticizing the hell out of everybody else because they're not as perfect as we are, when we are creating and sustaining subcultures within the church, creating churches within the church, just in case, this is not even new. LifeSite News, referring to Archbishop, what do you call Vigano now? Former Archbishop? I don't know what you call him now that he's been excommunicated. I really have no idea. And I want to be respectful. But LifeSite News is like, anyway, refers to him as a traditional cardinal. You notice the traditionalists are always doing this? They're referring to people and things as traditional this and traditional that. Why can't he just be a cardinal? Why do you have to set him apart? Is his baptism not enough? Why do you have to set him apart by putting traditional in front of the name? Why do you have to set Catholicism apart by putting the word traditional in front of it? Like a tool. Catholicism is already traditional. So by you putting traditional in front of Catholicism, it's bad grammatically, but also it means you're saying something with that label. You're saying you're other than Catholic. You're deeper than just Catholic. You're uber Catholic. My friend, that is not a spirit of oneness and unity. That's a spirit of division, divisiveness, disunity. And every time you say things like, I go to a traditional parish, you're doing it all over again. I read a traditional Bible. You're doing it all over again. Okay, then you're uber Catholic. Listen, folks. If you are that Catholic, here's what you should do. You should leave the church, renounce any fidelity to the papacy, and declare that the papacy is vacant. And you can call yourselves sedevacantists, because effectively that is where you are oriented toward. I'm not saying in your hearts right now you are sedevacantists, but that is where you're oriented toward. Many sedevacantists used to be ordinary old traditionalists. And then they were radical traditionalists. And then they were sedevacantists. You think that won't be you? I guess you're special. I guess you're preserved by the Holy Spirit from such grave error. It's not like we've seen that sort of thing in the church before. So I'm sure you'll be safe. And I realize, folks, that there are traditionalists out there who are not crazy. And I'm sorry that you all have to share the same label, because I know you're not all the same people. I'm sorry, but I didn't make up the label. If you don't want to be lumped into that same crowd, you want my advice? Get rid of the label. It's not doing you anything good. It's only doing you harm. Okay, one more thing before I bring the show to a close. To have a good Catholic attitude, you have to be rooted in love, not fear. Love that acts, not just feels. I will go further to say a love that acts, not just feels, but also a fear, if you have fear, a fear that acts, not just feels. Sometimes fear is valid, right? But that's not what I'm saying in these notes. But let me just continue. Sometimes fear is valid or understandable, but it's what you do about it that defines you, right? So when I say rooted in love, not fear, sometimes fear will happen, but you cannot act on it. You have to act on love. Rooted in love, not fear. That's how you have a good Catholic attitude. Because it's very easy to be a card-carrying member of the Catholic faith. It's even easy to be Orthodox. But true orthodoxy, you know, the literal meaning is right belief, orthodoxy. True orthodoxy is not just believing what you're supposed to believe. It's having a disposition. It's having a correct disposition, a correct attitude. Because I can point to I'm speaking rhetorically. I can point to 1,000 Orthodox Catholics who have such poor Catholic attitude that it wouldn't shock me in the least if they wind up in hell. I'm not saying they will go to hell. I'm talking about a snapshot here. And in that snapshot, if they were to wind up in hell, I would almost not be surprised. Because having right belief is not enough. You can have right belief on the left or on the right and still have such a poor Catholic attitude that the Lord just can't penetrate. The Lord can't. How many Catholics do you know who swear they know the faith up and down, but they're the nastiest people you've ever met? Nasty, just like nasty, right? You see how that happens? Because they may be Orthodox, but they do not have a good Catholic attitude. Do you want to spend eternity in heaven with them? No, right? Do you think the Lord is going to subject you to them that way for all eternity? Nope. So they're either going to get converted on earth, or they're going to complete their conversion in purgatory, or they're going to continue so far down the hill that they're not going to get to heaven at all. But one way or another, that will not wind up in heaven, that attitude. It'll get converted out, or beaten out, or just left out. Orthodoxy is just not enough. You have to have a good Catholic attitude. Before I take this to a close, I wanted to encourage you one additional time to sign up for the newsletter, Catholic Firebrand. CatholicFirebrand.com is the Firebrand Dispatch, CatholicFirebrand.com. It's my newsletter where I put together the different things that I've published and produced that week or since the last newsletter. Sometimes it's articles, podcasts, sometimes it's both, whatever. This way you don't have to follow me across various platforms and things. If you're interested in the things that I write, if you're interested in the things that I podcast, but you don't want to follow me everywhere, that newsletter puts you in the know. Also, I'm going to use that newsletter to send out relevant updates for people who really enjoy what I do. For example, there's some things that I do in the Discord server that some people just, for the life of me, they just will not go onto Discord, and that's okay. But there are some things I wish they could enjoy. Like I do a Church Fathers thing there. I don't really write it. I just kind of offer something from the Church Fathers, and I give like a 1-paragraph explanation or a reflection. It's really the Church Fathers who are doing the talking, right? I wish more people could enjoy that because I only do it on Discord. Maybe sometimes I'll send that to the newsletter people. Maybe sometimes I'll send my podcast scripts instead of just giving it to people on Discord. Maybe on occasion I'll send it to the newsletter people because it's not really a script like now you say this and now you say this. It's really the structure and substance of what I'm doing the show about. And it's something that you could learn from. You might be interested in looking at. Maybe on occasion I'll send those scripts to the newsletter people, stuff like that. So if you're really into what I'm doing, you would really benefit from subscribing to that newsletter, CatholicFirebrand.com. It keeps you in the know of the things that I published, and I'm going to start putting out a couple of little extras that right now only the Discord people are getting. Maybe here and there I'll share one of those like special things with you guys, like the Church Fathers thing or the show scripts thing or my scriptural reflection. I don't know. What do you want from me? What do I know? CatholicFirebrand.com. I also want to encourage you to join us on right? Not just me. Joining us on Discord, discord.gg/firebrand. It's a nice little community. It's pretty active, but it's pretty small, and that's okay. I don't care if there's 30 people there or 30,000 people there. I really don't care. as long as you enjoy it, because, and I mean this, it's not about me. Come join me. It's about all of us together. What I do for my part is I try to provide some features and things that make it a little educational, entertaining, whatever. Discord.gg/firebrand. You will find that link everywhere. All right, man, now I'm starting to get loopy. Oh, man, I'm going to do a post-show chit-chat session over at Discord. Discordians, hear me when I tell you, okay? The channel you want to go to for this post-show thing, you know how I have like different like virtual rooms set up, and one of them is the studio? In the studio, you will see that I have audience, which is a voice channel, and then I have audience, which is a text channel, and then I have, I think, backstage, which is a voice channel. We're going to convene in the audience channel under the studio. I think it says audience chat, that channel. We're not going to do a voice one, especially my voice now is like shot. So I'm going to do a post-show chit-chat. I'm going to hang out there for like 10 minutes. If nobody shows up, that's okay. If people show up and want to chat, that's great. I'll chat with them as long as they want to chat for. But if nobody shows up, I'll only be there for 10 minutes. This has been a very strange episode of Firebranded. I have been your host, TJ Haynes, the undisputed technician of the truth, and I paid a very, very, very high price over the course of 30 years, ladies and gentlemen, to be able to say that with total truth and confidence. The undisputed technician of the truth, TJ Haynes, signing out of here. Say Hail Mary for me and my family. God bless you. God be with you all. Bye-bye.